Welcome back to Coaches Exploring Clarity. Today we'll be reviewing Chapter 7, Stress, the Source and the Solution. And it starts off with a quote from Keith Blevins, "You're always living in the feeling of your thinking." And it starts off with this little Sufi joke that Jamie often shares. So I'll read through it because I've tried to tell this joke a few times off the cuff and I always screw it up. So I'll read it. I'll read and see how I do reading it. It's called "What Are You Looking For?" The time was 2 a.m. The policeman had just walked round the corner to find an intoxicated-looking man on his hands and knees, searching frantically beneath a streetlight. "I'm looking for my key," the man slurred. "Where did you lose it?" the officer inquired. "I dropped it in the long grass on a vacant lot a couple blocks away," said the man, still searching. "Then why are you looking here?" asked the puzzled cop. The man rolled his eyes and said, because the light's better here." The man's mistake is the Sufi joke is so obvious as to be ridiculous, but there are times when we are all the drunken seeker. And then I underlined somewhere in this chapter where it says you can't find something where it isn't. And that joke reminded me so clearly of how often I'm looking under the street lamp blocks away from where I lost
Oh
something.
yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah, God, every time. And again, I always come to something that's ridiculous. I recently I go and look for the I go and look for my phone in the fridge. Or I don't know. I just open the fridge and I don't know what I'm looking for. Or so I'm standing there gulping at the fridge with the fridge door open. Of course, all the energy is getting consumed, keeping the fridge cool. But never mind. But the problem is not that, and it never will be, and it never can be. The problem is what happens. Oh my goodness, that's it. It's Alzheimer's. It's rampant now. It's setting in. I'm not well. I'm going to have to see a doctor. I'm going to every time. But that's all it is. Because of course, the rest of the time when I'm not looking in the fridge, I'm certainly not thinking that.
Mm.
And therefore,
Hmm.
Alzheimer is light years away. How can that be? And it is, and it's same thing. It is so obvious as to be ridiculous, but that again is that we don't do this. We don't not so much look in the place. Obviously, it is ridiculous to look in the fridge for your phone, but what I'm saying is we don't look in the obvious place for the answer to our misinformed feeling,
Mm.
which is in our thinking. That's the bit I'm pointing to. Again, it's the somehow we seem to have this brilliant ability to override just inner wisdom, which reside in the words, "You're always living in the feeling of your thinking." That's the wisdom. And
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
What came out under that for me is underneath the Sufi joke, which I too have heard many times, Greg, and haven't even tried to share so well, but even we're getting through it. What I highlighted here was we don't walk around in our circumstances, we walk around in our experience. Everything in our experience is creating using thought, the reality principle. And just the notion that we don't walk around in our circumstances, we walk around in our experience, brought up so many things for me. The outside things that annoy you, thinking about other people, thinking about what might happen after sent out a post on Facebook, or and if we can internalize that we're not walking around in the circumstances, oftentimes circumstances that we are making up anyway because they haven't happened, or they have happened in the past. But in our experience, it brings us right into now.
Mm.
That to me is it just brings us right into now. And just to stop and look at the now, even in the midst of our busy minds and maybe stressed outness or whatever we're going through, is in itself just, for me, a calming thing that, all that's just stuff. and all I have is what is going on within me. That's not what I'm thinking when I'm calming down, but it seems to somehow center me, I would say.
Yeah, I really like that sentence too. It's like another way of that Jamie's pointing back at that, the idea that we're living in the principle of thought taking form in the moment, but this wording of we don't walk around in our circumstances just seemed to hit home a lot more than the other wordy kind of, I don't know, woo-woo kind of way of saying it. I'd highlighted that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something more to me that, and this is where I struggle, and I've had this conversation with you guys a lot. I somehow, the tangible is helpful for me, and that feels tangible, that I can actually, I get circumstances and I get experience, and it totally makes sense to me. Even though sometimes it does not feel that way, it makes sense that that's the way it is.
Yeah, for me, like the tangibleness of it is almost like a check and balance kind of thing. Like I can, if I'm getting caught up in my thinking, or I'm thinking that I'm walking around in my circumstances, I can check myself on that. Like, am I in my experience right now, or am I in my circumstances? It's almost like a form of a rumble strip, to use that metaphor. Under the source of stress, I highlighted the italicized part there that I'll read. The true source of stress is the mistaken belief that we're feeling something other than the principle of thought taking form in the moment, that we're at the mercy of something other than our moment-to-moment perceptions, a world out there in space or time with power over how we feel, which is the much more wordier way of saying we don't walk around in our circumstances.
Yeah.
But it's if people knew this, like really knew it, how different their lives could be. And I mean, I see it in myself and in my wife and my kids almost on a daily basis. We're all coping with stress, because, referring back to the last chapter, we all find ourselves caught up in habitual thinking throughout the course of the day.
Yeah. And just how Jamie just says after that, thought is a formless energy that creates the form of our moment-to-moment experience. Just as sand can be used to make any kind of sandcastle or sand sculpture, thought can create any kind of perceptual form, which kind of, to me, points to the fact that, well, actually, sand on its own can't. But you've got to add something, and in our case, it's some sort of additional junk in your mind, contaminated thinking, that will then go and create that form, which we then tend to believe, or the circumstance out there, if you like. So it's not, it's not just the sand. The sand doesn't. The sand's the main thing, the main structure. We do need some water and maybe a bit of cement later on if we're going to build something more solid, or so it appears. But it's not in the solid thing that we've built. The non-form is in the sand, if you like. And think how many beautiful sculptures and just nature will, if you watch if I had the pleasure of physically being in a windswept desert, and how all you've got is sand, but how the sculpture and the form and the shape and the marks on the sand and the way the dunes form and all the rest of it will change on a moment-to-moment basis, which I think is just incredible. And I had the pleasure of seeing that on a very windy day in Namibia, the red dunes, Yeah.
On the top of page 84, I highlighted the first sentence: the belief that we're feeling something other than thought makes us believe we are victims. And it made me think of Elaine and I in one of our courses we're on now. We looked at something called the victim triangle, which I think is rescuer, victim, and persecutor.
Yeah.
But it was like the thing that I got out of that triangle is like, prior to exploring that model, I thought of the victim as only being the victim part of that triangle, but really all three positions on the triangle are victim to the circumstance, or thinking they're a victim to the circumstance. So
yeah,
it's so freeing when you realize that you're not a victim. It's, on the one hand, it seems hard, I guess, or potentially hard to not, because to not be the victim means you have to do something or take responsibility, or I don't know. There's some element of that has, at least for me, often an element of fear associated to it. Like it's easier to be the victim sometimes.
yeah,
At least it appears to be.
yeah. I think it is indeed easy to be the victim, especially when somehow, but again, it's thought created, the consequent responsibility or sovereignty or ownership,
Mm.
kind of terms that we use, that we need to assume look also enormous, but of course the enormity is again in the thinking.
Mm.
So it's that sort of gentle or violent passage, between who you were and who you are,
Yeah.
if you like. That sometimes I can understand how indeed learning this stuff is a little bit maybe difficult sometimes. It's difficult to grasp. But as you say, it is so freeing to move out of the victim, whether it's perpetrator or whatever it is, out of that triangle anyway, because it's all in there.
Mm.
And again, and interestingly, just as we're talking, and then I've just read the next bit, the reality check, where, because I was beginning to think as you're speaking, yeah, but okay, so if I actually get all this stuff sorted, then I'll be bored as hell. Like now what? But of course, it's not that. It's the idea that because you've taken all of that stuff away from yourself,
Mm.
you're free to create, and not only just create something, but create something that's extraordinarily exciting and motivating, and creates passion and all the rest of that. So there's nothing boring in there. And moreover, it's creating not what passion or creativity or gorgeousness looks like from the outside, from the circumstance, but it's something that you have created, which is even more powerful because you did it. Yeah.
I both just got me thinking there when I can think of times in my life when I put myself in victim mode without intentionally seeing myself or putting myself there. Of course, you don't see that until afterwards. And what's going on there? It's always that other stuff, circumstances are not right. There's always I can't do this because I can't be that because I can't. There's always a because, and it's an external thing. And then this is so interesting. I hadn't even picked that up when I read these few lines. When you see that that's not there, and you just spoke to that directly, Lynne, the freedom in it, there is nothing. There's nothing holding you back. There's nothing holding you back. You're free to be and do what you choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
You talked about this the last time, Greg, when and this is the top of page 84, where the contrast between like worries, feelings, anger, stress, rage. And then it goes on to say, strange as it may seem, it can also apply to pleasant experiences, the idea that fun, happy, enjoyable, loving feelings are coming from something other than thought. You were talking about that last week, and you were saying, yeah, I know that, but I want to believe it's from my lovely wife and my kids and my family being around. And of course we do. Why wouldn't we? That's part of the humanness about it, I guess.
Yeah.
It's funny that we're happy to think that all of that is from something else, but the bad stuff, no. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
The contrast.
And right below that reality check part, Jamie reminds us again, we're always and only feeling the formless principle of thought taking form in the moment, period. It only works one way. Even when we believe we're feeling something other than thought, it still works only one way. It made me think like this could almost be a drinking game in this book. Like how every time Jamie says that, you have to take a drink. Like we'd be drunk by now, and we're only 5 chapters in.
It's only page 84.
But it just occurs to me like how the repetitive nature of this premise pointing to that's the key. It's so important. Like, and I think that's why he keeps banging on it every chance he gets. That's the key. That's the missing link is it.
And maybe we could ask Jamie that, but it kind of to me points to me as well as I guess Jamie knows that, and also because the mind at the end of the day, or your brain, should I say, or however you look at it, will always go back to what he once coined as the term, the caterpillar soup. We always go back there. So it's like, it's like the seesaw, the swing. So Jamie keeps putting the same weight, the same thing on one side to keep the balance, sort of thing. What's on the other side could be a myriad of anything, but all you need to do is put on the other side, we're always and only feeling the formless principle of thought taking form in the moment, period. And then, of course, the slide goes, the seesaw goes back down again. So he just adopts another lot of, we're always and only feeling the formless principle of thought form in the moment. And off we go again, this, which I think, I guess kind of Jamie knows that. But it's indeed, and one of those things, I sometimes say I need my little post-it or mantra. And it is great to look back to every time. And sometimes that's all it takes, just those words, that sentence. And you go, oh, God. And whatever was bothering us or whatever just sort of drifts away. Where else? Yeah. Nothing like
really related to the road rage story on page 87 because I've been known to have a little road rage in my time. The busier the city gets here, and I guess what I noticed too with the coming out of lockdowns and stuff, as traffic has started building back up, as people started going back to work and working. I don't think everyone's still yet in a 5 days a week at the office, but when I'm out on the road and the traffic's really heavy, I'm now catching myself like literally every 2 minutes catching myself caught up in road rage thinking like, why is this guy, like, doesn't this person know how to drive, or what are they doing? Why are they in this lane? They don't have a signal on. Like they're intentionally not signaling just to piss me off. Like all these absurd, ridiculous ideas going through my head. Anyway, this little story of how you would train somebody to have road rage, I think,
to actually have road rage,
is a very powerful example.
Yeah.
I forget what it was, what it is. Yeah. And you could pretty much apply it to anything. There are so many circumstances in the day that could totally piss us off.
Yeah.
You could pretty much apply it to anything.
Yeah.
You know. this is one of those things that I think, imagine if everyone could see that, because for sure blood pressure would stay at a reasonable level. People wouldn't be getting, stress-related diabetes, and it's so much in that. It's only one example, but if we take, the road rage and other things that get people, worked up and stressed and angry, and just all this stuff. If we could, if that was the only one thing that we could help people see, it would, from a health perspective, I think it would just do so much. So
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. Add the whatever it is going on to your going on in your head that seems to cause the road rage. I'm just thinking of examples here in Italy. It's crazy, especially when it's very hot. So even it looks like even the weather can affect your road rage. And I mean, I've literally seen, scenes of people, they get out of the car and they actually get into a fight. You wouldn't believe it. Crazy. But
that is not an unusual occurrence here.
Yeah. And you think, oh, God, if only they knew, if only they knew. If only they knew.
On page 88, under the solution to stress, I highlighted, Jamie referred to athletes. Of course, I had to highlight this part because of my tendency to like to work with athletes. But it says athletes often report that when they're in the zone, it seems as though on the one hand, it doesn't matter whether they win or lose. On the other hand, they're going to give it all they've got. And it reminded, I was watching a World Hockey Championship game the other day. It was Canada versus the US. And Canada was up 3-1 with like a minute to go in the game. And somehow the US scored 2 goals in less than a minute to tie the game. And it went to overtime and then to a shootout. Anyway, it went like 9 or 10 shooters before Canada won. But when they interviewed the lady that scored the winning goal, she said I think the word she said was like, she almost blacked out. Like they asked her about the goal and this move she put on the goalie. And she's like, I don't know. I just kind of blacked out and just did it. But to me, it just was a perfect example of in
the zone
moment of enormous pressure, she just got into complete clarity. Like she was thinking so little that she doesn't even remember what happened consciously. She just did what she had to do and got the result. Anyway, I thought it was, terrific. And it was cool to see as the tension in this game and the overtime and the shootout built, like they're showing pictures of the crowd and the game's being played in Canada. So of course everyone's on pins and needles and like there's people like fanning themselves. They're having heart attacks in the stands because this game is so close.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I love. I love sports as a microcosm for life, right? It's everything you can see everything that goes on in real life in a sports match.
Yeah, indeed. And I love the tennis as well for that reason. You see, yes, it's life, and they take their lives into the court. And how many times I've seen, my heroes. So it's Roger Federer or Nadal and Djokovic. I admire his playing. I'm not a fan of his, but no. Oh, and even the more. We've got a lovely Italian guy, Zinner now. He's doing great. But you can sometimes tell how the match is going to go as if you just look at their kind of behavior on the court, if you like. And if they're sort of nervous and jumpy differently to what they are when they're just playing superb tennis, you can almost guess how the game's going to go.
Yeah.
Even before they start. Even with the big players,
Yeah. Well, I think when you watch like the big names like Federer and Nadal or Djokovic play each other, when you see two competitors who are both in clarity in a match, like that's when the level of competition is so like, so that's the thing with sports I love too. Like somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. It doesn't always mean the loser was caught up in their thinking or whatever. It's just sometimes the other player was just better that day.
Wow.
Or got a bounce or whatever. But when you like, I love watching competition where it's not like one person just sucked and the other person beat them because the other person failed. It's like two people competing at the highest level. I don't know. I just love watching that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember, I've been curious for a long, long time because like it didn't make sense to me that actually anybody could, especially let's take the top first 100 players in the ATP or the women's or the what is it, world, whatever it is anyway.
WTA.
And it like, yes, thank you very much. The it just didn't make sense to me. I thought, well, like these guys, like I knew, that they do the same amount of training. They have the same like tech things. They all have their coach or psychotherapist or whatever. Then they have their physiotherapist. They have everything, and they're doing the work, and they're playing, and they're in the gym, and they're doing, and they all do the same at the end. Same number of hours, same number of reps, same number of like, different techniques for certain shots on the court, whether the ball is spinning or it's not spinning or it's spinning backward or forward. They all do that, and they all do that perfectly. So it used to really, I was really, really interested. So how can anybody actually win a tennis match? How can there ever be a final? Because theoretically, they all should be playing at exactly the same level. So the only thing in my, knowledge to date that can get in the way of them not playing their absolute best is thought. There can't be anything other than that. You think about it. Oh, injury, of course. Of course.
That was the only other thing that I could possibly come up with there. Yeah.
Even injury, though,
again,
injury is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because I see it where somebody gets injured. Like you've seen people get injured, but fight through it, and like they still win the match. And then basically after the match, then they collapse because they're they're finally like, okay, now I can feel this. And other people, it's almost like they're looking for an injury to get out of the pressure cooker.
Yeah. And the other thing, and that's that's when I can see, for example, at the time on Roger Federer's face, that's when I saw and that I knew he would lose that particular match. Because he would, but if you could look at him and you didn't know anything about Roger Federer or anything, what you would see would still be a perfect execution from a tennis player. Absolutely perfect. You'd still see that. What if you look closer, what you see on his face, like if Roger Federer begins to just have a drop of sweat, there's trouble brewing because he doesn't even seem to sweat. I don't know how he does that, but he doesn't. It's effortless. And then you can see it on his face and he starts looking rather pissed off. And then you find out later that actually he's recovering from, or he's had a bit of a knee problem, or he's had a bit of a back problem. And probably what's going on is an awful lot of thinking about that, because if he's also at such a level where I think he himself decides whether he's going to play or not. It's not his physiotherapist or the doctor that tells him. He knows it's okay to play, so he does. So he's deemed in top form. But of course, the memory of the injury and all the rest of it can wreak havoc in your mind. You're thinking about it. And I see that time and time again.
We wrap up with the thought experiment at the end?
Yeah.
I'll read it out. What would it mean to you and for you if you were to suddenly realize that 100% of your felt experience is coming from thought taking form in the moment, that 0% of your feeling coming from anywhere other than thought?
There would be no road rage.
Mm.
Sorry, Lynn, sorry, I didn't hear
There
that.
would be no road rage.
Okay. Yeah.
This made me think of Jamie's video where he's using the teddy bear metaphor, which is a video. It's on YouTube, and I've shared it, I don't know, many times with people. I've filmed myself doing it with my own little teddy bear, but I didn't do quite as good a job as Jamie does explaining it. But just the idea, because I love the teddy bear one because it's so relatable for people to go, oh yeah, 0% is coming from the teddy bear, 100% of it's coming from the child. And then it gets flipped around and says, okay, well, what if the teddy bear is your mortgage or your relationship or your boss or your career or whatever? And then it looks a little more scary than when it's a teddy bear.
Yeah. 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 It looks kind of serious because I sort of the teddy bear. Oh, well, that's not serious, you know. So you can take that stuff on board, you know, because it's not serious.
Yeah.
But then you talk about my bank account. Oh no! Oh no!
Yeah.
Yeah.
0% of your feeling is coming from your bank account.
Yeah. Yes. Whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not, yeah.
And that even includes
whether you're thinking about it or not.
that even includes when your bank account has a huge balance in it.
Exactly. There, we're back to the contrast.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Indeed.
But yeah, that I do like that. And that's a good point. Maybe, I don't know if we're going to wrap up, but to me that is a good point, because sometimes when we're thinking about this stuff and the thoughts, we automatically, well, I don't know, I can't speak for you guys obviously, but it appears that we automatically think of the bad things. So the bank account being empty is what came up for us there, why we're laughing, right, Lynne? Or the bank account being full. It's either or. It's the same. Either or, it is the same. And I think when we're thinking about 0% of your feeling is coming from anywhere other than thought, we think, oh, those bad feelings that we have, those angry feelings, those whatever feelings, as opposed to all of them. It's all of them, the happy ones, the sad ones, the gleeful ones, the proud ones, whatever the feelings are, that's the place. Yeah.
I think, and also that nature will have it that just the way you are, even when it's the happy thought, that I have a lovely husband and I have a lovely family and I have a lovely bank account and I have a lovely car and a lovely house and it's all just wonderful. But it seems to be that actually, even at a certain point with a lot of people, we actually then start worrying about what would happen, not so much about the fact that we haven't got something, but then what's going to happen in the future if something happens. So indeed, it's useful for us to know that it works both ways, because we can get caught up in that in a negative sense, if you like, either way. So that's why it's good to know, I think, that it works both ways. Yeah.
Even people watching this program, 100% of their feelings about the program is coming from thought in the moment. This program.
Nothing to do with us.
not at all, whether they like it or not. Just get your likes out there and just share it.
That was a good note to end on.
So thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.